Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mings, and a little while ago I made a video titled What if Fire Emblem 7 characters had personal skills, where I toyed around with the concept of designing personal skills for Fire Emblem 7 characters. And it received a lot of positive response. You guys seem to really like it, and you suggested a lot of really cool skills in the comments. So I was like, you know what, if it was a success, why not repeat it? Let's do the same concept but with Fire Emblem 6. So without further ado guys, let's get started. So let's begin by designing a skill for the main character, Roy. And honestly guys, this was one of the biggest challenges I faced making this video. It was very hard for me to decide on a skill that suited him, because how do you design a personal skill for a guy with no personality? I mean, it's not that Roy doesn't have a personality, but he's kinda bland, and don't take it from me, like, Roy literally describes himself as not particularly charismatic or smart. So he even describes himself as very bland and average. So how do you design a personal skill for that? Well, I thought a little bit about it, and then I started thinking about Zephiel, who's the main antagonist of this game, and how he's basically a stark contrast to Roy. Well, Zephiel is all about being isolated and alone, right? So I figured Roy's personal skills should revolve around his friends. And so I came up with this, Young Lion. Support bonuses increased by 50%. So this skill does not only give Roy a bigger benefit from his supports, but it also affects the units he supports with. He both receives and gives 50% increased bonuses from support conversations. So this skill won't really be active at the start of the game, but as soon as Roy starts accumulating friends, or whenever you start shipping him with one of his many wives from his insanely big harem, seriously, what is up with that? But yeah, at the end of the day, this skill was one that I found both suited him personality-wise and also gameplay-wise. Wolt, Best Friend. Unit deals 3 extra damage when adjacent to Roy. Sometimes you don't really need to overcomplicate things. All Wolt really needs is a nice, simple personal skill that grants him a little bit of extra damage. Requiring him to be adjacent to Roy is a bit of a steep requirement, but he does get an insane 3 extra damage out of it, which will really help his early game damage output. A nice little side bonus to this personal skill is that it really incentivizes the player to build their support, which will indirectly help Roy out thanks to his personal skill. Marcus, Instructor. Adjacent unpromoted allies gain 20% extra experience from combat. Among Roy's early game squad, Marcus has the role as their instructor. He is basically the one who taught them all how to fight. And even on the battlefield, he still continues to incentivize them to improve on a daily basis. Yes, this is pretty much a copy of Bylette's personal skill from Three Houses, but it has an added caveat of not working on promoted units. At the end of the day, Marcus's role in the story is to act as a bit of an early game crutch and then get benched later on when he gets too old. And such, I didn't want to give him a skill that was useful throughout the entire game. Instructor is a personal skill that certainly can continue to be useful for quite a while as long as you have unpromoted units in your army, but at some point I want this skill to fall off, just like Marcus does. Next up are the personal skills for Alan and Lance, and I'm going to continue the tradition of doing the Christmas calves together, because just like Kent and Sane, their skills are going to be very similar to each other. Alan has Charge, which grants him 10% extra crit when he's attacking, whereas Lance has Patience, which grants him 10% avoid when he's defending. This is very much supposed to represent them in the story, where Alan is the guy who loves to charge in, whereas Lance is the guy who wants to slow down and take his time. So I figured these two personal skills just made sense. I will say that Lance's personal skill is obviously going to be a lot more useful than Alan's, but hey, we can't all be equal. Dieck, Wounded Tiger. 30% extra crit when the unit is below 50% health. Yes, I know this is just wrath. No, I don't care, because I think it suits him. I mean, just look at the guy. In case you don't know Dieck's backstory, he used to be a gladiator in an Etrurian arena, and one day, baby Clarine fell down into the fighting pits, and Dieck had to protect him against a charging lion. Or maybe it was a tiger? I don't really know, it might depend on the translation. Now, I don't know how baby Clarine was able to fall into a gladiator arena, or what Pent and Louise was doing taking their freaking child there, but that's a story for another time. I feel like this skill really suits Dieck. It has a cool name, and it kind of fits his fighting style, which is all about being macho. I mean, just look at the guy. He fights bare-chested. You gotta be pretty macho to fight bare-chested. Clarine, Forced Bodyguard. If adjacent to male ally, unit gains 15% avoid. Your first encounter with Clarine sees her placing herself in your protection, forcefully, against your will. In fact, we see this in quite a few of her supports too. She seemingly just decides that you get the honor of protecting her on the battlefield. So just imagine Clarine hiding behind another unit, letting them take the punishment instead of her. Clarine is already known for having very high avoidance, so I figured a skill that boosted it further would just be funny. I mean, we all know nothing's gonna hit her once she promotes anyway, and this will incentivize her to constantly travel behind another bulkier unit, which fits both her personality and playstyle. Rutger. Bloodlusts. For each enemy killed, Rutger gains 2% extra crits, but minus 1% avoid, stacking up to 10 times. I figured that some kind of skill that boosted Rutger's already insane crit rates would be a lot of fun, even though some people may argue it's a little overkill. This skill effectively works like the Taker skills from Fates, only that it affects crits and has the added penalty of slowly decreasing his avoid. This is to represent Rutger getting increasingly more reckless as he accumulates kills on the battlefield, and with each kill he makes, he only gets more violent. Some might think that reducing a Myrmidon's or Swordmaster's avoidance is going to be detrimental to them, but I feel like Rutger is so overpowered anyway that the 10% reduced avoid he gets at the end of this won't really impact his performance at all, especially considering he gets a whooping 20% extra crit at the end of the day. Saul. Peachy Preacher. When adjacent to a female ally, Saul gains 10% extra crit and 10% crit avoid. Just like with Sane in my previous video, I felt like Saul's personal skill had to revolve around women somehow, because that's his entire gimmick. He's a horny priest. The 10% crit he gets is supposed to represent his eccentric nature whenever he's adjacent to a pretty female. But since I know giving crit bonuses to a unit that can't initially fight won't really have an impact on his early game, I figured he should also get a defensive buff, and I chose to give him crit avoid because Saul has really low luck, which often leads to enemies having crit rates against him. So with this personal skill, you can now circumvent that weakness by placing Saul next to a pretty lady. Dorothy. Scary Bodyguard. If unit is adjacent to Saul, Saul loses the benefits of Peachy Preacher, but instead gains 20% extra avoid and minus 2 damage taken. Dorothy's role in the story is to act as Saul's bodyguard. Now, how an archer acts like a bodyguard to anyone is beyond me, but hey, that's why she's there. But she also seems to have a secondary job, and that is to save nearby women from Saul, even though Saul seems to think she's scaring them away. It therefore made sense to me that Dorothy had a skill that revolved around protecting Saul somehow, but it didn't make sense for me that Saul would get both the benefits from his own personal skill and Dorothy's personal skill at the same time, so I designed one that forced the player to choose. If you want Saul to get extra crit and crit avoid, keep him next to a lady. If you want him to get extra avoidance and less damage taken, place him next to Dorothy. It may not be super ideal, but I think personal skills should be used to establish bonds and character traits above anything else, and this is what I feel this skill does. Treck. Sleepy Savant. Unit is immune to status effects, but has a 1% chance of falling asleep at the start of each turn. Treck is all about falling asleep on the battlefield, and yet he never actually does this as a unit, so I wanted a personal skill that remedies that. Now obviously a unit that has a random chance of falling asleep is really bad, so I made the chance really low. With the 1% proc rate, this skill shouldn't occur often, and when it does, it's hopefully more comical than anything else. Now, the upside of him being immune to status staves is probably not going to be very useful either, but it somehow just seemed to fit Treck. I imagine he's just too dense for status staves to even have an effect. You try to berserk Treck, and he's just gonna go like, huh? What's going on? Probably nothing. It's a bit of a silly skill, and I know it's not gonna make Treck any better, but honestly, you should love Treck regardless of his performance, because he is just precious. Lilina. Ostian Thunder. Critical hits deal 4 times damage instead of 3. Now I know what you're all thinking. Mangs, this is complete overkill, and completely useless. But you know what? It's fun. We all love Lilina because sometimes she has that small chance of just obliterating a unit by erasing them from existence with massive crits that deal way more damage than they have any right to. And honestly, why not just build on this? 9 out of 10 times this skill will not be useful at all. But neither is Lilina, so there you go. I'm just joking, guys, I actually think she's pretty good. Gwendolyn. Armor March. When starting turn adjacent to an armored ally, unit gains 2 move for that turn. Gwendolyn is the kind of girl that gets really pumped up by having other armor knights around her. Once she sees them moving, she wants to perform better and thus starts moving faster herself. I figured this skill would both fit her personality and also give her a rather unique playstyle, an armor knight that actually moves faster than other armor knights. Yes, I know that a skill that requires other armor knights to work is kinda bad, but then again, so is Gwendolyn, so yeah, there you go. Man, I did it again, didn't I? But this time around, I'm actually not gonna make any excuses. She sucks. Fear. Sword Student. When adjacent to a sword-wielding ally of a higher level, Fear gains 50% extra experience. In the story, Fear tends to gravitate towards strong sword users, so a skill that causes her to constantly follow other sword units around made a lot of sense to me. However, it doesn't make sense that she would do this with weaker units, so I added the caveat of the unit having to be higher level than Fear. Eventually, when she gets her promotion and becomes one of the strongest units in your army, she should no longer need to do this. Cecilia, Tutor. Adjacent allies earn tome and staff experience twice as fast. Cecilia's role in the story is to act as a bit of a magic instructor. She trained Lilina in how to wield magic, and she tried to do the same thing to Roy before discovering that he had absolutely no talent for magic whatsoever. So I figured that a personal skill that helped her tutor nearby staff and magic users would fit her really well. There's really not much to say about the skill. I think it's simple, effective, and gives Cecilia another role than just being a bad unit. Sophia, Draconic Foresight. Unit has 20% extra avoid, but is vulnerable to Wormslayers. One of the things that always bothered me about Sophia in the game is that she's actually a half-dragon with some pretty unique powers. She has the ability to predict danger much in the same way Ninian and Nils could, and yet this power does not affect her gameplay in any way. She's just a bad shaman with really lopsided growth rates. So I figured I wanted to give her a personal skill that really establishes her power, while at the same time also nods to her draconic heritage. If a unit is able to predict incoming danger, it makes sense that their avoidance would be a lot higher. Sure, you may not be fast enough to dodge that incoming arrow, but if you know the archer is firing it, you should have a better chance of evading it. And let's be real, Sophia sucks, and that extra avoidance is sorely needed. Now, I can hear some of you guys saying, "Oh Mengs, why did you include a weakness with this skill by making Sophia vulnerable to Wormslayers?" Well, it's kinda simple. You almost never go up against Wormslayers in Fire Emblem 6. So as far as I'm concerned, this skill is just fluff. However, I would actually add a hidden quirk to this personal skill that is not listed in the description, and that is that whenever Sophia walks over treasure hidden in the sand, she always finds it, similar to a thief. It will only help her for a single chapter, but I figured it would be pretty cool. Igrene, Guardian of Nabata. Unit can move freely over sand and has increased vision in sandstorms. Now I know what you're all saying. Mangs, this skill is useless. There's only a single desert chapter in the game, and Igrene joins right after it. Well, if I were to remake FE6, I would make Igrene join in chapter 14. It always made sense to me that the Guardian of Nabata should take part in the Nabata chapter. I know that in the story, she's busy protecting Arcadia against Byrne's forces and is there to mainly watch over Fa, but I mean, come on, can't she come out of the village at some point to meet you? I feel like she should contribute directly on the battlefield, and it would make her introduction to the story a lot cooler. It would also allow her to participate in chapter 14X. I know some people might not like a personal skill that literally only helps a unit for a single chapter, but just imagine how useful Igrene would be with this skill. She could run around in the desert, not being slowed down in the least, and with the extra vision she gets during the Sandstorm Fog of War, she'd be really helpful in spotting enemy Wyvern Knights. Overall, having a really good performance in her joining chapter just makes me think a lot of players will give her a second chance. Hugh, Shadow Gift. Unit can use dark magic, but improves rank at half speed. Hugh is a unit that I think really struggles to stand out in Fire Emblem 6. He's an unpromoted mage that joins rather late, and he costs a lot of gold to get. And the problem is, he's not really anything special compared to the two other mages you already have. However, being the grandson of Nime, we know that Nime at some point tried to teach him dark magic, but she was quite frustrated, as he had absolutely no talent in it. For this reason, I feel like Hugh should come with a really low rank in dark magic, making him quite unique in that he is a mage who can use flux. However, in order to use any other tome, he would need to train like crazy, because again, he sucks at dark magic. I don't think this skill would make him good, but it sure as hell would make him unique. Alright, so that was a lot of the playable characters. Let's end this video by doing some of the bosses, starting with Narcian. And this one I am kinda proud of, if I may say so myself. His personal skill is Arrogance. Narcian gains minus 20% avoid while at full health, but gains 20% avoid whenever he is damaged. With Narcian, I always envision that whenever a unit walks up to him, ready to fight, he just stands there and laughs, because he thinks himself so much better than them, and thus he won't really be as inclined to have his guard up. However, the moment he takes any damage, he becomes super paranoid and becomes jumpy and jittery as hell. This is a skill that I think just suits his personality perfectly. Whenever dealing with Narcian, make sure you deal a lot of damage with your first attack, because after that, he's actually gonna start taking you seriously. Murdock, Immovable. Unit takes no extra damage from armor-slaying weapons. Yes, I borrowed this skill from Walhart, and no, I am not ashamed of it. With Murdock, I feel like the guy's just so huge, he doesn't really care about hammers and armor slayers. They just break against him. I mean, just look at the guy. The dude has capped con. Capped con! What can an armor slayer do to a guy that's basically as big as a tent? This skill would obviously make Murdock a nightmare to fight, but I say good, because honestly, chapter 21 is a bloodbath, and it's kinda anticlimactic how you can just walk up to the boss of that chapter with a simple armor slayer and one round him. I never really liked that, so yeah, make that boy immune. Zephiel, Isolation. For every human ally that falls on the map, Zephiel gains 1% extra hit, avoid, and crits. Zephiel doesn't like humans, in fact, he hates humans, so a personal skill that buffs him the more humans you kill on his map just sounded hilarious to me. Note that I am specifically saying human allies because Zephiel shouldn't get happy when his dragons are killed, just the humans, because screw the humans, they suck. Brunya, Nice Thighs. Oh wait, that's the old notes. Brunya, Undying Loyalty. For every point of damage taken, Brunya gains 1% hit, avoid, and crit. This skill is a little similar to Zephiel's in a way, except that it works on Brunya herself. There is no question that Brunya has a lot of loyalty to Zephiel, even in death, and a skill that just makes her more dangerous the more damage she takes just made a lot of sense to me. She could probably still have nice thighs on the side though. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that was me designing personal skills for a lot of characters in Fire Emblem 6. This video was a little longer than the previous one because I obviously have a lot more to say about Fire Emblem 6, but I had a lot of fun with this and I hope you guys had fun watching it. As with the previous video, I'd like to hear you guys make your suggestions in the comment section below. Let me hear some personal skills for the units I didn't mention, or maybe some improved skills for the units that I did. Also let me know if you want me to do a similar video for Fire Emblem 8. I got some pretty cool ideas for that game as well. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like and a comment, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye bye!